Too serious? You can smile. It's okay. Nothing will happen, promise. You guys can start just 1 minute, but you can start saying hello.
Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Grant Foster, and we are going to show you today a little bit of what we're up to here at Buoyancy on the software development team. And I'll introduce Fran in just a second. We'll advance to the next slide when we're ready to start. So our presentation is called Starting Simple, the Slippery Slope of Software. A big mantra that we have here at Buoyancy on the software team is that not everything should be automated. And we really take this approach of trying to really scope out projects, understand the problems that they're trying to solve, and use software as an enabler instead of technical debt that can bring your company to a grinding halt. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, my name is Grant Foster. This is Francisco. We are two members of the software development team here at Buoyancy, and today we're going to walk you through some of our projects and problem statements that we've addressed over the last couple of years.
Hi all, thanks for joining. Like you can see there, we're both trained architects that started coding, started getting ourselves in this world of software development and trying to mix both worlds together.
So a big thing in the design and construction space is data handoff. We've typically seen this done with documents, with actual drawings. And now as the industry is evolving, we're seeing more and more that data is being transferred in other ways. And so we're seeing this big transformation, but there's still a lot of time spent finding different documents, especially in handoff phases between different professionals in the industry. And it's generally a process that's not very scalable. And so we've really looked at the problems that have plagued the industry for the last couple of decades and try to leverage the data that's already being produced as much as possible. And we'll walk through some of the problems that we've addressed. But we really saw this option to merge industry standards in software development with the AEC industry and really empower architects, owners, designers, and engineers to work in a smarter way and actually leverage the data that they're using on a day-to-day basis. So today we're going to walk through a couple different projects, I believe 3, and they really span a wide variety of scope, all the way from a simple automation up to a full stack platform. So in the software department here at Buoyancy, we like to think of our projects in 3 different categories, and often there is a lot of overlap. So today we're going to talk about these 3 buckets. The first one being automations. So for automations, it's really about taking a well-defined problem and scoping it down to a button. This could be a literal button or it could be a metaphorical button, but the idea is we're taking a process down to a very quick action. So this could be linking 3 manual steps together. Some examples of problems we've seen, there must be a faster way to create this Revit model. That problem could be solved by grabbing a family automatically and placing it in an intelligent way, and that could be considered an automation. We also tend to look at our own business and try to improve our processes internally, even if it's something administrative like creating a proposal. And we really try to leverage as much as possible storing the data that we are generating when we automate things. If I write a simple tool, it may be useful for me to understand the types of data that the user is outputting each time they run the tool, and I might be able to improve how the automation works in the future by gathering this data. The next piece of work that we do here has a lot to do with integrations. And this involves taking at least 2 existing services and connecting them together. This can mean something like connecting your Google Sheet to an Airtable. Maybe you want to take your Revit data and upload it directly to a Google Sheet. These would be integrations that we would perform, and it typically has a lot to do with transferring data from one service to another. The third and final bucket that we tend to operate in is with platforms. We are a full stack team, even though, as Fran mentioned, we are trained as architects. Over the years, we've picked up many engineering skills, everything from back-end to front-end development, and currently leverage some JavaScript libraries like Vue.js and Google's Firebase ecosystem to develop full stack apps, including user authentication, all of the sort of non-sexy stuff with software, and this really empowers our customers and our company internally to work better and create these single sources of truth. So I'm going to hand it over to Fran, who's going to talk about our first problem that we solved.
Yeah, so everything that Grant just presented was intended to make a theoretical introduction, but our goal today is to tell you about our process in a more practical way so that you can get a better overlook on it through the projects that we've and problems that we've encountered. So we wanted to show you 3 very different case studies framing the concepts that we just outlined. Also proving that automation and software can help in a vast amount of situations if applied correctly, even in industries like architectural construction, where there are still to this day very outdated practices. So for the first case study, this is Barrio 31. It's a neighborhood in Buenos Aires, Argentina. It's an interesting case study where technology was applied in several ways to solve a vast amount of problems in a like very complex scenario, maybe a context where you wouldn't think of applying these kinds of solutions. Can we? Yeah, thanks. This is one of the most crowded, insecure, and impoverished areas in Argentina, and it makes a huge contrast as it's only blocks away from the heart of Buenos Aires, the country's capital city. So the government called for competitions to solve this problem. They created a master plan with several parts and stages. One of them related to facade renovations, infrastructure, and security measures. And it also included evaluating the state of each and every home to determine the specific needs in each case. So it was a very accurate thing to apply on each of these units. We have here on the next one a couple of pictures just to stress how big the contrast is with the context of the area, and also for you to imagine having to measure all that manually through traditional methods, how tricky and crazy that would be. So this resulted in several challenges that we had to face. Like we said, this neighborhood grew organically without many utilities, like without any planning whatsoever. So it was 6,500 homes that needed basic utilities, and standard methods required more than 1 day per home on the process end to end to solve and really get to survey all this. It's also important to note that it's more than 40,000 people that currently live there. So we thought there had to be a better way to do this. So we measured and surveyed the whole area with laser scanning, with aerial surveys, and also like mounted scanners, like with teams walking. So then from there, we had a solid foundation to apply BIM in this context, and also software automation had a very important role here to save around 100,000 man hours in work on the several stages of the project. I think we have some delay on the slide changes. Sorry for that. There were some key needs here. We need to create models, BIM models, capturing both existing and enhanced conditions, like reflecting what needed to be done in each home. Information exchange was pretty important because we needed to communicate all this design intent somehow. So that's where we started extracting drawings and quantity takeoffs from each home in the models. And this had to be done with a high quality standard. So that's where we applied also software automation for QA and QC practices, and also some manual checks to validate important data. So this is where we would like to frame these case studies in the concepts that Grant was describing. So when we have to identify an automation, if we translate it to this case, we started asking ourselves some questions, mainly if the actions that we wanted to perform occurred in one platform, like this series of logical rules and steps that we were describing happened. Where did they happen? And if this platform was open to scripting. In this case, the platform was Revit. So we validated these three assumptions, and we found out there were a lot of opportunities to apply automation in this context. So as you can see in these GIFs, for example, on the top left one, we have for a specific case, we had to create wall finishes in many of these homes and replace windows and doors. So we had a very fixed set of rules that we had to follow, depending on the level of the wall. For example, that changed the data on the wall finishes. Same for the windows and doors. It changed depending on the current state. That was all already input at some point in the models, so we could leverage that to translate it into automations. And the other three images reflect similar cases in other elements of the models. So once we had all this, we knew we could scale it up and continue building on top of an already reliable model and a set of automations that ensured quality in the data and the work that we were doing. So we started identifying the need for integrations. So we were saying integrations make different platforms talk to each other. So this was a case where we needed more than one platform to work. We had common data points, and they were open to scripting. So again, we validated these questions, and we were able to use leverage integrations in this project. So in the next slide, we have an example of that. We started using Dynamo to make quantity takeoffs. That's an old GIF, but the script grew to be like 10 times as much as that. It could scale up as the project moved, and we found out other needs. We could continue to work on it and add more features and more intelligence to all of that. So here is where, for our final part of this project, we identified we could scale again all that to a platform and make a kind of case study around that. We also have an example on the next one. We started putting ourselves in the place of, for example, a contractor that wanted to bid for a portion of this master plan, and I would be interested in having an interactive platform filtered with information that is useful to my business, and also putting these 3D models, 3D BIM models and data available through a web browser, so that I wouldn't need to use any specific or complex software to do it. So to finish, we can say this was a streamlined process backed by data and software from beginning to end, starting with the point clouds like we see in the image, passing through BIM models, and finishing with the site work. So here we have another case study.
Yeah, so Delos is going to be the second case study that we're going to walk through, and really starts to get into how we've been helping not just architects and engineers and designers, but actually owners and operators, and leveraging all the technology that's evolved over the last couple of years to build a living and breathing data model. So a lot of companies, including us, organizing documentation and data is very difficult. It's hard to access, it's hard to analyze, especially using some of these more old school deliverable, like models and drawings. So we analyzed the average worker only spends 39% of their time performing their specific task. The other percentage of their day is in email, searching and gathering documents, and especially in communication. And so what we want to minimize is the private chats that happen across the day, and really leverage the data as the conversation. So at Delos, we wanted to create a web platform that hosted 3D model data and also attached to sensor data, so that people could understand how their spaces are being used in real time. We wanted to minimize the searching for information, remove these siloed debates, and actually bring everyone to the source of truth on the web outside of Revit. So you didn't even have to be, Revit savvy to access spatial data. So Delos had a couple different parts. It wasn't just a web app. Part of it was getting your model ready to be harvested. And so we were able to take design standards, spatial standards in this case, in developing a floor plan and automate the modeling of the floor with those rules. This ensured a certain data accuracy when we harvested the model, and was really amazing in capturing the logic that's inside a designer's mind into code. What we like to say is, it'd be difficult to sit down with someone like Frank Gehry and immediately understand all of his design logic. But if he had it all in a JSON file, it would be extremely easy to understand. And so there's a really interesting process that happens when you start to codify your standards. You look at them with more rigor and you analyze them with a finer lens, because it will scale. If you have a problem in your standards, don't release that tool, because now you're going to have 100 problems with your standards. So there's this balance of risk versus reward that we're always aware of. And with Delos, another advantage of harvesting the model and making it easy to do so is the ability to achieve design snapshots. We're able to compare harvests against each other, understand how much of the floor plan is being utilized for one particular thing, and really get a sense of how the space was both designed over time and also how it functions over time. Delos is kind of a work in progress. It's a tool we touch from time to time, and we're really excited to continue evolving this and offering it hopefully as a product down the road for other companies to use. As I mentioned, we're not just building tools for architects and designers. This part of Delos actually allows anyone to access 3D model data, spin around the floor plan, and get a sense of the type of work that's actually happening in the model. We like to also link up this workflow to other integrations downstream. So if there's an Excel report or something that you have to mimic, that type of deliverable would be exportable from this type of platform. But when possible, we try to keep everything live and on the web and interactive, so that downloading and exporting doesn't have to take place. This is a sort of animated rendering that we were able to produce from these serialized harvests. And we like to show this slide because, it's not just about, the interactive web apps, right? It can be as elegant as a rendering that changes over time to deliver building information. Again, where we come from an architectural background, so I think Fran and I especially have this soft spot for allowing code to be beautiful and actually make artwork that we're used to in the industry. And that's a big thing that we like to focus on. I will pass it over to Fran to talk about SHIP.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting product that we've been building. It's one of our latest projects. So it's basically a marketplace where design meets software. So here we started with a problem that we've always faced, that we waste dozens of hours a month shipping software to clients and maintaining it and updating everything. So basically the traditional process that we usually use is that we compile our code as this is me talking as a developer. We compile code and we basically make that into an installer that the clients can use, and we literally email it somehow to them. We then make updates and fix errors and constantly have to rework and resend all this, so it's not very practical. So we were looking for a solution but we couldn't find it, so we built one. Like the saying goes, a rising tide lifts all boats, and SHIP is our attempt at doing just that for architects, designers, builders, and also developers. So we've been on both sides, as architects and as developers of this problem. Whereas on our architectural side, we found it insanely hard to find the right tools for our work daily. And as developers, we also struggle to connect with users and get feedback from them when they use what we build, and to actually find out what exactly do they need. So we thought of solutions for that. We thought that a product this would fit into, in our previous framing, into the platform category. A platform that would make it easy to discover and install tools that would directly integrate with GitHub for the developers, and where a community could be built around finding and identifying this and getting feedback. So here we will walk you through a little about the different features. Grant was going to walk us through, but I think he's having some internet issues, so we can continue from here and see if he joins back. Basically, to browse this platform a little, we have the login part where people, both users and developers, can log in with different providers like GitHub or Google, depending on what you use. Developers will probably use GitHub. Then for the browsing part, you can start searching through tools and trying to find what works best for you, and trying to really have a big marketplace here. This is just, we are yet to launch it, but we're hoping that we'll get many submissions from different developers. And here, this is a huge win, in my opinion, for both users and developers. You can install apps and also get the latest versions as soon as developers release them. And also for developers, it's a huge advantage not having to manually update everything each time you change something, and also being sure that people have access to the latest always. Also, if you want, you can choose previous versions, so you also have that flexibility built in. And you can manage all this from an admin or developer side, and we are expanding the features as we speak. So you can submit apps, and in the future you will be able to manage user groups and enterprises and many other features that we're working on right now. So this, an important part of this is that it's all open source, so it's fully transparent, and also developers, besides submitting their own apps, they can contribute directly to the project and deploy their apps through it. Like we're showing there a little bit of the documentation that we have for people to be able to understand it and use it pretty easily. And it also works with large downloads, so that's not a limitation for it at all. It could work for many different use cases. So if you want to see more about it, you can head to the GitHub page that we're displaying there. We'll probably send more information in the future, and also let everyone know when we do the final release. But in the meantime, you can jump to that page and start poking around. It's pretty interesting. So what we want to invite you to close this webinar is to start getting yourself in all this world that we were presenting. We wanted to invite you to an automation workshop because we believe, like we tried to explain all these concepts through practical cases, but we believe hands-on experiences are a lot more effective at translating these ideas. I don't know if we went to the next one. Thank you. The idea is to give you a deeper sneak peek into our process. We'll send you the sign up information. The idea is for you to bring your problem statement, and then we can start analyzing and working together on it so that you can get to experience this whole process that we've been talking about. So the problem statement, we believe, is a very important part. This is just a quote that we like. Basically, Einstein said that if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes thinking about it and only 5 thinking about the solutions. So basically, it all starts with a problem, and the idea is for the time between here and the workshop to be those 55 minutes, and the workshop should be those 5 minutes where we think about solutions. But it would all start with you thinking about a problem statement that clearly presents the start, condition, and issue in a very precise and quantifiable manner. You can quantify it through different magnitudes, time, money, and also it's important to not jump into solutions from the beginning. So here are a couple of examples of what we would consider bad problem statements, being broad and vague on the details, and also implying solutions like the last one where we said something should be automatic. I mean, it's not necessarily that way. So that would be our main takeaway at this. And on the other side, what we would consider a good problem statement, like we would say a problem well stated is half solved. We can say that something takes an average of time or money, and if we could reduce it by a certain amount, we would save certain resources after it's solved. I think we have Grant back. Are you back, Grant?
Yes,
so this
very
is
sorry about that.
nice. So this is an example of one problem. We have another one next, I think. It's just to give you general ideas of basic examples that we would consider as good problem statements. As you can see, this one is about finding files. We say how much time it takes per person per week, and we start to magnify that and actually grasp the size of the problem. I think the next one is pretty similar. Yeah, so this is another example that you could translate to your own case. And I think I'll let Grant wrap it up here now that we have him back.
Yeah. Thanks, Fran. Yeah, so I think our overall message is essentially that we're here to help. We love working on all types of problems, and we love training people on how to think this way about their own problems. So I definitely encourage everyone to sign up. And it's one of the most helpful weeks of education I've pretty much ever had in my life. So I definitely recommend it to everyone. And I think there's one more slide I might be able to add, but we have some information on where you can find us. We are Buoyancy at buoyancy.com. You can find us on LinkedIn. We have offices, pretty much global company at this point. So no matter what your time zone, we can meet you halfway. And thanks for joining us. We're really excited to see you guys out there on the community with Ship and some of these other automations that we've been working on. And thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be meeting the ones who sign up in the workshop.
Thank you.
I don't know if we have any questions.
Boceto for you, Fran. Which is the most difficult project you work on and why?
That's a hard one. I think they've been all difficult in different ways, like in the way that luckily they challenge you to learn more and from the project itself and from the people you work with. So I think that's a very, very satisfying thing on this type of work that we do. And I would say one of the hardest ones would have been Barrio, for example, from the ones that we showed today, because I was just starting off with a lot of this, and it also was a very challenging project and a very complex situation overall. So I definitely learned a lot. I think it came from Boceto, the question. I don't know if I heard properly, but yeah, I learned a lot from him too. So it was a very nice project.
And I have another one for Grant. You being an architect, how did you start coding?
Great question. And I think I do speak for a lot of architects turned developers. I started with Python and inside Revit. So, what we like to say is when you're making the transition from anything into software, it helps to code in an environment that you're used to working in manually. So Google Sheets or Excel could be a great example as well. But for designers, Revit is typically where they are working. And so automating, simple rote tasks like naming something differently or aligning things evenly across a room or something like that was kind of the first stab. And I think the other thing we'd like to say is now is always the best time to start learning how to code. Software has a way of making it easier and easier and easier over time. And so the time is now. It's much easier to learn now than it was 3 years ago, and it's going to keep growing that way. Yeah.
About Ship. So what's the most, like, if you have to describe Ship in a word, what would you say?
Easy.
Yeah, that's a good one, I think. I think I like the idea of community that it brings. So that would be another word I would use in the sense that it brings all these developers and users together. in an industry that doesn't have such place to gather everything. So
And the last one, what is the biggest challenge you have on a daily basis in an industry where everything is changing so fast?
That's a good question. I mean, I think as companies, experiment with more and more tools, that becomes very difficult. A lot of what we do is integrate with how companies already work. And so our expertise has to be really wide and broad to be able to deliver for a variety of customers. And so that is a very challenging thing. The other side of that is that it's really awesome that there's all this competition out there, because now it means that most services that people rely on are really well built, very robust and well documented. So it does slice both ways, but it's often the most challenging thing to quickly become an expert in a platform or specific type of technology that we otherwise weren't aware of.
yeah, I totally agree with that.
Here is Sheep.
Adapting. Yeah, sorry.
So I have another question from Nick. Is Sheep also a platform for analysis and operation, or is it fundamentally for interoperability of existing and custom tools? Which analysis might be one of?
Yeah, we have right now it's still somewhat under development in terms of reaching the initial MVP. We have plans to integrate, systems like error handling, other analytics tools that developers can use. We're kind of biting off this problem one piece at a time, but it's absolutely in the roadmap to offer that to developers to make it even easier for them to deploy and improve their tooling. And so, yeah, it's absolutely on the roadmap, and I would encourage you to contribute to the code base and help us get there.
Yes. Thank you, Grant and Fran, for doing this. And if you have any more questions, please do. You always have our emails, social media, webpage to contact us. So feel free to do it.
Definitely. Thank you all for joining.
Thanks.
We hope to see you on the workshop. Bye, everyone.